Hey everybody, happy Monday morning. All of you community builders all across Alberta. First of all, congratulations to the Saskatchewan Roughriders for an incredible win. Oh, Sheets! That's what I kept on saying all day yesterday. And to all of my good friends in Nanton, you won the bet. We got $50 going to NAPS and to help raise money for the new animal shelter. What are we talking about today? Well, the agent of change. Last week, as we discussed the agent of change, the agent of change understands, demonstrates, and exerts influence through trusting relationships to act as a catalyst for change. And in our teaching session, I gave you a proactive exercise to build trust. It was a proactive exercise around listening. I challenge you to send out a 3-question survey, an anonymous survey to all of the stakeholders you interact with. And if you're in a leadership position, those that you lead. If you're not, peers that you interact with. If you were an organization, you might send it out to organizations that interact with you. And the purpose was to gain feedback, because feedback is the breakfast of champions. But also, the purpose of the exercise was to build trust. How's that? Because when I send out a questionnaire and I say to people, tell me what you think about my performance or our performance, I allow them to turn it in anonymously. And then they see me working on the feedback they gave. At minimum, they're going to appreciate that we've listened. At maximum, trust will be built. Stop and think about it. Now, hopefully you've sent out that survey. Now, what do the responses mean? Oh, by the way, if you haven't sent it out, you can still send it out. What do the responses mean? Well, first of all, I'm going to look at the trends. In other words, I'm not looking at one thing that somebody says or another thing that somebody says and freaking out, good or bad. One individual piece of feedback isn't enough for me to either feel good about myself, frankly, or to make a change. I'm looking for trends. I'm looking for consistency in the responses. That tells me that there's something really going on, good and bad. So let's look at question number one. Question number one, what am I doing right? Now, what does that mean? That seems so simple, Ian. It's so evident. Well, on the surface, yes. What am I doing right? People are telling me what they appreciate about what I do or what I say or how I act. But there's a little bit more depth to it. If you remember, I had encouraged you a number of weeks ago to identify your assets, your abilities, the things that you do well. This question helps you compare what you think you're doing well or what value you're bringing, in your opinion, and compare it to what other people find to be valuable to them in what you say and what you do. That's an important piece. You have a perspective of the value you bring to the dynamic, but so do they. And are they identifying that there's some areas of value that you're bringing that you didn't even know was on the radar screen? Are there some areas of value that you're bringing that you hadn't even identified? And did you think you were bringing a significant asset and others didn't find it to be so? So what I would be looking for is the trend. What am I doing right? Does it line up with what I think I'm doing right? Second question, what am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. Now, what we're trying to do here is look for areas, trends again, where people think that I can grow. Now, this is always the tough one because it stings a little bit. It can hurt a little bit. But I would encourage you, just because one person says you're deficient in a certain area doesn't make it so. What I would do with question number 2 is I would look introspectively within myself to see if there's any validity to what the person's saying, or that they could have a perception by what I'm doing. Could I be creating a perception even though their perception is incorrect? Because whether it's valid or it's a perception, I want to address it. Here's another little thing that you can do to check to make sure. You might go to some that you know and say, hey, I got some feedback around blank. Do you think that's true about me? Now, the leader today who's really wanting to be their best will be transparent. You want a transparent leader. I want a transparent leader. People will respect you. So we're looking for trends in question number 2. We're not freaking out about any, one piece of feedback that's far afield, but we do check it and we look introspectively, maybe run it by some others. Suggestions for my improvement can help you build your action plan. And then finally, question number 3. If you could send me back to school, what class would you make me take? Now it's funny, it's kind of a silly question, but it's meant purposefully to validate question number 2. In other words, if you get feedback in question number 2 around your listening, then you need to be a better listener. And then people say that you need to go back to listening class, that's pretty much validation, right? It validates the question number 2. Now, all of those, what's the point? 1, to gain feedback, to help you be better, so you can create action plans to take the necessary steps to reach your full potential. But within the context, and thereby build trust with others, I would encourage you to send out that survey regularly. Every 90 days is what I used to do when I ran a large organization. Every 90 days for my direct reports, and then the whole organization, 1,100 employees, got to give me feedback twice a year. Sets up a dynamic of trust. But in the context of this exercise, the Becoming a Community Builder program, next week, after the teaching session on Friday, next week I'm going to ask you to start making your commitment. Remember, this program is free, but it's not, in the sense that I'm going to ask you to make a commitment of what you're going to work on the last 9 weeks of the program, 10 weeks of the program. So this feedback, this exercise could help you identify the one thing that you're going to work on. Imagine if 800 to 1,000 people across rural Alberta picked out one thing and worked on it in the balance of the program, and at the end of the program were better at it. Not only would their lives be better, the lives of those around them be better, but Alberta would be better. So how do I pick out my one thing? This could be an exercise that would help you. If you've done the exercise, you're ready to start thinking about picking out your one thing, the trends that were shown. If you haven't done the exercise, you still got this week to send out that survey. The agent of change builds trusting relationships. Through those trusting relationships, exerts influence to act as a catalyst for change. Want a way to expand your sphere of influence? Get feedback from stakeholders, take their feedback, do something with it, you'll build trust. Have a great week, everybody.